Hello, welcome. It's Pauline again from PQW, and we're back with the Exquisite Quilt, episode 8. And it's exciting because we're going to be at the sewing machine. I've got my machine all ready to go. And I know that a lot of you already know that I love my Bernina. So I'm going to work on my Bernina and explain all things about that. But then you're going to have to look in your manual for your brand and your model sewing machine to understand what you need to do with what I'm showing you that I do on my Bernina. I can't guarantee that every machine is going to be able to make the adjustment that I'm going to show you, but I'll explain a lot of things to you as we go through, and I will explain in depth why I chose to use the Bernina machine. It's just that when I started developing this technique on my older machine, I couldn't do it. But when I found the machine I could quilt beautifully with, that's why I went for this brand, this model. But we're going to talk about setting up everything. But to start with, the blocks we're going to do, we're going to work on B2. If you can see, I've got my tag at the top. We're going to work on B2. We're going to work on B1. And it's not going to be in any order. It's just I wanted to introduce you to simple designs to quilt firstly. You can make the choice which blocks you start with. We're going to do A3, just a little one with the clamshells. But if you're drawn different designs on your blocks to what I have, that is fantastic. I love people that think outside the box and get a little bit creative themselves. And this last one we're going to do in this session is C2. Just to give you some little bit of variations to explain a lot of things to you. So I've got my blocks all drawn up here ready. So all of these designs have come from our dot to dot pack. So when we work with the dot to dots, this is where all these designs have come from that we're going to quilt in this session. Now, setting up the machine. I'm going to use the open toe foot. This is the foot with nothing in the front. It's completely opened. Now, it may look different for your model and your brand machine, but you don't want a foot that has anything in the front, because remember, we've drawn the line on the fabric and we want to be able to see that line. Our feed dogs are up. Our stitch length is going to be set to, on my machine, I like to quilt with stitch length 3. You might like to vary yours accordingly. That's your choice. I'm going to use a fine thread, an 80 weight thread. Now, the reason I'm using and suggesting an 80 weight thread is a lot of times when we're doing this form of quilting, the control quilting technique, I'm going to be stitching back over some previous rows of stitching. And I find the thicker the thread, it just doesn't sit in there nice. It gets too bulky, it gets too heavy, it doesn't look nice. So my thread of choice is the Wonderfil size 80 Deco Bob. That's what I'm going to have in the top of the machine. And I've got it set up on the machine. Now, with using a fine thread, or a lot of threads, a lot of people have troubles with the thread coming through the top tension. A lot of machines can split your thread as they go through the top tension. It can break your thread, it can jam up. We've got to understand the threads. Our threads are always wound onto a spool. Now, when it's wound onto the spool, we can see that sometimes it's got a curve in it, it's got a twist in it. It just doesn't come off nicely because it's got a memory of where it's been twisted around the spool. Now, if any little curve or twist goes into your top tension, it can cause all of those tension problems. So to avoid that, and with this thread, I recommend using the thread dispenser. Now, this is an amazing little tool. It's not expensive, but it solves a lot of issues with thread breaking, thread splitting, all of those sort of things. If we're laying this thread down on the spool holder, as it comes off, the thread just unwinds. And that's where it can keep that twist in the thread. Even if it's standing up, it's going to unwind off there. And the thread, the stand, it usually just stays stationary and the thread unravels. With this little tool here, when I put my thread on here, this top part of the stand swivels. So when I put my thread on here, wash it on, we've got two little splits in this little post, two little splits. I'm going to put the thread through that split. Then as I'm sewing, the whole spool, because that base is rotating, the thread comes off and the spool is turning as the thread's coming through the machine. And I get no twist in that thread whatsoever. So that solved all of my splitting threads and tension problems simply by using that little thread dispenser. So that's my recommendation, and that's how I'm going to have my machine set up. It's a brilliant little tool. I'm going to use the monopoly invisible thread in my bobbin because I've got a multi-coloured back, okay? It's got light blues and dark blues in it. I find that if I used a blue thread and where we're going to go back over some previous rows, a coloured thread in the bobbin is going to show up too much because remember, this is going to be the back of your quilt. You want it to look really neat and really nice by the time we join all the blocks together. If you've never worked with the monopoly invisible thread, when you take this thread out of the packet, down the bottom of the packet you're going to find this little bit of, I call it a gauze jacket. Don't lose that. Once you undo the thread to start with, please put that jacket on it, pat it down so it sits there nicely and leave that on there permanently. So that controls the fine thread so it doesn't come off and get jammed up. This thread does not fit on that thread dispenser. You'll just put this on your machine normally. When we wind our bobbin, I want you to wind your bobbin at a slower speed. Please don't wind it at full speed because it is a fine thread. As you wind the bobbin, it can get caught in under each layer of thread and it can jam up. So we're going to, I usually put my machine on a medium speed to wind my bobbin. And when I wind the bobbin, I don't want to fill the bobbin up to complete maximum because that is too much thread for your bobbin to cope with. This is such a fine, fine, fine thread that if you fill your bobbin with this thread completely, you're going to overfill your bobbin. So half fill it on slow speed, you won't have any issues. So that's just a little bit about our threads. I use a titanium top stitch needle. Now I choose to use top stitch needles for a few reasons. Reason number one, we're using a fine thread. If we use a needle that's got a really small eye, just a regular needle or a quilting needle that's got a small eye, we can run the risk of a heat friction between thread and needle happening, and that will split your threads and it can skip stitches and do all sorts of silly things. So using a titanium top stitch needle, we have a much bigger eye. So we're not going to get the heat friction building up. Our thread shouldn't split going through the needle. It shouldn't split if you're using the thread dispenser. And also being titanium coated, it's a lot stronger than what a nickel plated needle is. So we're going to make this whole quilt with one needle, and I'm guaranteeing that the needle won't go blunt unless you hit a pin or do something silly. So I've had this needle that I've got in my machine, I've had it in there for hundreds and hundreds of hours and it's still as sharp as the day I put it in. Equivalent to a regular needle where I would have probably gone through 2 packets of needles by now. So longevity with these needles, brilliant. The other thing that I use and I recommend on the bed of the machine is your Soslip mat. So if you don't have one of these, this is going to make a huge difference to how the fabric's going to slide through under the needle. So you're going to need the one with the big cutout in. See how that's got a big rectangle? That's the one to have. They are available with a little circle. Now the little circle one is made for free motion quilting where we drop the feed dogs down. We're going to have our feed dogs up. So the one with the little hole will not work. You can try it, but you'll find that your feed dogs won't move through. A lot of people have cut out the circle to be a rectangle and they've said to me they wish they hadn't have done it because the mat splits. Obviously this is cut out under heat and it's sealed so the mat doesn't split. So make sure the bed of the machine is clean. Dust it down with a cloth first. Make sure it's all clean. Put this on so the small section comes in to your machine and the large section is coming out here. Now you may be using an extension table bigger than what I've got on. This one, I'm just going to let it fall down here. Just tuck it in underneath. Now just position that so your feed dogs are exposed completely. Now before you do anything else, just grab something and pull your bobbin thread up through that hole. Make sure your bobbin thread's up. Now pat it down. You want to pat it so that it's adhering to your sewing machine. Now we're going to be doing a lot of quilting through this program and you might come to your machine one day and go to do some more quilting or more sewing because I leave these on my machine through the whole process, which you'll notice as we work through each session, this will always be on my machine. But what happens is as we're sewing, we can create fluff and lint and dust, and the sticky side of the mat will attract that. So every now and again, if it's moving, it's going to tell you it's time to take it off, take it to the laundry, soak it in some nice hot soapy water, rinse it, shake it, let it dry naturally. That will take all that lint and fluff off it and you'll get a nice surface back again. And you can do that forever and a day. So that's why I love that mat. Okay, we're now ready for adjusting our sewing machine. So now if I'm going to try to sew, I could quilt these lines on this block here quite nicely without making an adjustment. You could quilt this with a walking foot, but I don't want you to do that. I want to teach you the control quilting technique. What we're going to do, because as we work through all the different designs, we're going to have to keep adjusting the machine. So I want you to learn to adjust right from the beginning. So we're going to stitch these lines, but if I go to start stitching these lines now, and remember we've got the 3 layers ironed together with the Hobbs fusible batting. Sorry, I've just got to get my foot control. Now if we start stitching this, as I work through, it's going to work just nicely. But as I get into tighter curves, my fabric's going to start puckering and it'll start bunching forward. And I don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our manual and you're going to look to how to adjust pressure off your sewing foot. Okay? Some manuals will call it pressure foot tension. It's nothing to do with your tensions for your threads. It's the amount of pressure that your foot is putting down on the fabric. So we need to understand that. Downward pressure is there to hold the fabric between the feed dogs and the foot. But as we start to come around tighter curves and everything, we're going to need less pressure. Otherwise our fabric starts to pucker up and starts to bunch up, particularly when we start to do feathers and everything. And this is something I want you to practice. And I would suggest before you go onto your blocks, you cut a couple of pieces of fabric and backing and batting and iron them together. Do some practicing and get your machine set up and write your numbers down. So on this machine, My full pressure for normal sewing is set around between 70, 75. That's the number that comes up on my screen for normal sewing. Now I find to stop any movement out of these 3 layers as I work through on this design, I'm going to adjust my pressure down to probably around, we'll go to about 35 for this sort of stitching. We've got our stitch length set to 3. Just remember we've set that. Get your tensions right. I'm not going to go into tensions because all our machines are different. You'll have to adjust your top or your bobbin tension till you get nice continuity of your threads. You don't want any top thread coming through to the back, and you don't want any back thread coming through to the top. But try on your machine, I don't know what brand you're using because we're all using different machines. A lot of machines, their full pressure might be set at 8. And to do these gentle curves, you might want to come back to about 6. When you come to tighter curves, you might want to come to 4, or you might want to come to 2. I've come to 35. But when we go on to the next block, I'm going to take my pressure down to 11. So I'm taking a lot more pressure off because my curves are going to get stronger. They're going to get tighter. And I've been working with my machine for quite some time, so I know my numbers. So that's what I want you to get to know, your numbers. So we're not going to sit over the machine with our hands pressing down on the fabric because that will restrict the flow of the feed dogs. That's how we would quilt when we were free motion quilting, because we need to keep pressure on the fabric. But with this technique, we don't want any pressure on the fabric. So we're going to work with our needle in the down position, so every time we stop, we want our needle to stay down. If you don't have that device on your machine, when you stop, keep a hand on your fabric and wind your wheel down so the needle stays in the fabric. So now to quilt, I want you to use angel fingers. I want you to have very light fingers. I want you to hold the fabric at the front. See how my fingers are at the front of the block? I want you to hold the fabric at the front, and I want you to just glide it under the needle. If you feel more comfortable with your fingers up here, do not put pressure down. Light fingers, remember they're angel fingers. And we're just going to sew on any line that we want to sew on. So when we get to the edge, with this much pressure on, I can't turn the fabric around, so I have to lift the foot and turn the fabric around. But as we get into the more lessons and take more pressure off, we won't have to lift the foot. But I just want to take you steadily through all of this process. So we're just going to keep sewing. You know, I'm going fairly fast because I use this technique all the time. You might want to sew slower. You can slow your machine down. You can go very slow if you want to. But remember, your machine is doing all the stitching. Your stitch length will stay even. It won't if you keep too much pressure on. Hand pressure, I mean. Now, when I get to this edge, I'm not going to stop and turn around. I'm just going to pivot it and sew really close to the edge, because we're going to trim off later on. Oh, I will have to lift the foot because it's going to jam underneath. And we're just going to keep stitching till we get every one of these lines stitched. Now I've got to a previous row of stitching. I'm stopping with the needle right where the 2 stitching lines meet. I'm pivoting the fabric and I'm coming back up here. With this random design, there's no rhyme or reason which line you stitch first and which line you stitch last. Come to the edge, pivot around. And this is the nice part about doing small blocks at a time. We haven't got that big bulk to deal with. And it'll get exciting when we start joining the quilt together in the next few episodes. Now, a lot of times I'm coming down to an area now. I don't want to stop and tie the threads off. I'm just going to stitch back over a previous line and pivot back around. And this is why we need a nice fine thread. As you work through your first couple of lines, and you'll check this when you're doing your practice sheet, always turn it over and check that your back of your work is as neat as the front, that you haven't got any of that top thread coming through, haven't got any of that mess underneath that we can get. Check that your stitch length is even. Get it all set up on a sample first. Write your numbers down. If you've got my Quilt As You Go book, write everything in that book, because we'll be referring to that book a lot when we start joining the quilt together. So you can see how I'm stitching now and how relaxed it can be. We don't need to sit over the machine. We don't need to do anything like that. So now I'm going to have to come back down and stitch over a previous row, pivot around, come back. Really, really simple, really fast to quilt up lines like this one. It'll get a little bit slower as we get to the more intricate ones, but that's the basis of quilting. So you're just going to keep stitching over all those lines. Remember, if you've got to go back over a previous line, slow down, take your time, do a perfect job. So just continue quilting that one. I'm going to now move on and we're going to do the next block. Do you notice I didn't have to reverse? I didn't have to tie off threads. I just go to the edge, turn around and come back. So we're now going to work on B1. This one here, more curves. So this is now where I'm going to adjust my pressure from 35 down to 11. You might be going from 6 to 4 or 3. You just have to work out what it's going to be. But read your manual or go to your dealer. I'll show you in the next episode why I chose this machine over every other one out there. So I'm going to move it down to 11. Lock it in. Now doing these curves, we can start anywhere. And we're just going to go down. Now sit back, hold your fabric at the front and just glide your fabric under the needle. The hardest thing for you to do is keep your eye on the line. But the lighter your fingers are under here, the mat underneath is designed to slide your fabric. Like I can come around this corner. I can come right around. So if this was your first lot of curves you were doing, I'd suggest put your machine on a slower speed, go a little bit slower so you can control the curve that you're doing. Don't go too fast. I'm just doing random here. Normally I would go down one side, come back the other, do all the ups and downs and then turn around and come across to the sides. But I just want to show you quickly how we can go anywhere. This is how hard quilting is. There's nothing hard about it except you understanding what your machine can do. If I'm getting to a point now, I'm going to stop right on that point. I can now pivot around and come back the other side and get perfect stitching. So it's a real joy to sit and quilt like this. And it shouldn't take you too long to get this design quilted out. So that's how I would quilt that one. Of course, when you get to the end, you can just stop, turn and come around. Pivot, don't have to lift the foot because we've taken off enough pressure that we can adjust the fabric underneath. So I'll just show you on the next block the little clamshells that we do. This one here. Once again, we're just going to sew down one way, then we'll come back the other. But it's a smaller curve, same thing. You just need to keep your eye on the line, and this is where you wouldn't go so fast. But if you feel it's bunching up a bit, which mine is doing, I need to stop and I need to take a little bit more pressure off. So I'm going to come down to, what we come down to? We'll try 9. Perfect. So that's how easy it is to do those. So come down one way, then come back the other direction. You might want to stop at each one of those meeting points. But I just wanted to introduce you to a tighter curve in this lesson. Just keep quilting that block, or quilt any block you want. I'd suggest you leave the feathers and some of the more intricate ones till we get back to you in the next session, because there's a few little tips I want to show you there. Now I want to just show you a little bit about this C2, because we've got the clamshells, sorry, we've got the melons. Okay, so you're going to stitch those the same. You'll just start at 1, you'll come through, just get my threads in. We'll talk about tying off threads and that in one of the other episodes, but we don't need to tie off threads in this session. I'm coming down. Now I've got to that wavy line that I have there. I'm going to now take one more stitch. I'm now going to stitch down on that line. I'm going to pivot around to the next part of the next melon and come through. Just take it slow. You know, try and be as neat, don't rush, try and be as neat as you can, because I want you to be really proud of what you can do as a quilter. And I know you can be a perfect quilter if you follow along with us. Now we're going to come back the other way. Just keep your eye on that line. Manage your fabric, nice light fingers. Now I've got to the next section where I've come to the line. I'm going to come down, I'm going to travel down that line, and I'll keep going like that. Once I've got that done, I'm just going to stop here and I'll cut my threads. If I was doing this, I'd normally tie it off if this was for the quilt, but I've already got my blocks quilted. These are just your demo ones. Once I've got all of the melons done, I'm then going to come and do these lines once again, and I would have stitched over it in a few places, but you're not going to see that using the fine thread, and using that clear thread on the back, you nearly need a magnifying glass to see where you've stitched over it more than once. Just come down. To the side, we'll pivot around. We'll stitch back up this line. So remember, we'd have all of this already quilted. Now, I wouldn't normally be marking my blocks as dark as what this one is, because it'll be hard to wash out. I'd be doing it a lot lighter than this, but I wanted it to hopefully show up for you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide, you know, if you measure this, you can divide it up, and I think I've done 1/2 inch intervals on mine. So what we're going to do is, I'll just lift my pressure foot up. I'm going to line the edge of the foot here on that stitching line. Pop it down. Now I'm going to move my needle position over a couple of positions so that I can see that I'll fill that up nice and even. And once we come through here, as I'm stitching this, I'm going to keep my eye on the edge of that foot, not the needle. You could draw lines here, equal lines if you wanted to, and just follow the lines. But it's really good to understand all the nice things that your machines can do. A lot of people, like I'm one that never used to use a lot of features on my machine, but now, gosh. So on my machine, I can see that I'm on -2 to the left. All right, I'm going to pivot around here, stitch across, lift the foot, put this back down, and lift the needle. Now I'm going to move my needle over so that it's coming the opposite. Oh, sorry, I have to go back this way to get the same distance. I'm going to, it was -2 to the left, now I'm gone to 2 on the right. Oops, my stitch length has just changed. I touched the wrong button. Right, so now I'm going to have the same distance, what I've stitched here, when I do this row, it'll be the same distance. So I'm working with -2 and 2 for my needle position. And this is what the lovely features are on this machine. The numbers keep me on track with everything I do. I just love it. So we pivot around, just go over that one more time. Stop, lift the foot down, lift the needle up, put my foot right against the edge of the previous stitching line, move my needle to -2 and stitch. And you can see that all of my distances are exactly the same. And that's why using your machine to the best advantage, they're brilliant pieces of equipment. We just need to understand them. We need to have the right machine. Like if you want to make lots of quilts and do it this technique, investing in a machine that does all of these things for you is the best investment you'll ever make. So I want you to quilt along with me, do your practice pieces, pull out these blocks that we've mentioned to you, quilt them up. I want photos. I want to see what you're doing. I'd love to see what you're doing because I'm here to teach you as much as I possibly can. In the next episode, we're going to get really, really creative. In episode 9, we're going to do a lot more curves. We're going to do feathers. So come join me so I can show you a lot more. Then when we get to episode 10, we're going to be doing applique. And then it's going to get exciting because we're going to start to join together from there on in. So get your quilting done. Get your simple blocks done, as many as you want to quilt, till we come back together and we show you how to do your feathers and tighter curves. So till then, enjoy what you're doing, have fun. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.